Have you ever desperately prayed for something? I mean, you know what I'm talking about, right? I mean, that desperate from your soul, that in the Bible is described as crying out to God, that kind of praying for something, whether it was like a decision in your life, whether it was a healing from a sick one, a loved family member, whether it was peace in the midst of chaos, or even if it was just, just the strength to get through a difficult time. But whatever it was that you desperately prayed for, and then God answered that prayer. What did you do next? Did you merely express relief? Like, I'm so happy that happened that way. Were you self-congratulatory? Boy, I sure am glad that worked out for me. Or did you just move the next prayer need up to the top of the list and move on? What is the proper response to answered prayer? Well, that's what we're going to look at today. What is the proper response of a believer when God does answer prayer? We've been looking at prayer this entire time, but what happens when God answers? What should be our response? We're going to be camping out in the book of Psalms, Psalm 138 to be specific. So if you have your Bible, please, at this point, begin making your way towards the book of Psalms. But let's get started by reading in Psalm 138. Let's read it together before we dive in. Hold on. I will give you thanks with all my heart. I will sing your praise before the heavenly beings. I will bow down toward your holy temple and give thanks to your name for your constant love and truth. You have exalted your name and your promise above everything else. On the day I called, you answered me. You increased strength within me. All the kings of the earth will give you thanks, Lord, when they hear what you have promised. They will sing of the Lord's ways, for the Lord's glory is great. Though the Lord is exalted, he takes note of the humble, but he knows the haughty from a distance. If I walk into the thick of danger, you will preserve my life from the anger of my enemies. You will extend your hand. Your right hand will save me. The Lord will fulfill his purpose for me. Lord, your faithful love endures forever. Do not abandon the work of your hands. All right, the book of Psalms. Okay, Psalms is from the Hebrew word tehillim. I think I got that right. And which actually means praises. For many consider the book of Psalms like a prayer book or a hymn book of ancient Israel. It was composed over thousands of years by many different authors, although half of the Psalms are attributable to King David. But it's not just a collection of individual psalms. It's not just a random collection. It's not a greatest hits thing. It's actually got a definitive shape. It intentionally shows us how to worship, how to pray, how to lament. It shows us wisdom and praise, and it teaches God's people how to respond to him in every phase of life and in every circumstance. It's a pretty big deal. So the Psalms not only teach us what to believe about God, but they actually can teach us how to speak to God. When you hear people talk about, I prayed the Bible, the vast majority of the time, they're talking about the Psalms. When you don't know what to say, the Psalm has something for you. And that's where we're going to go to now. If we want to know what is the proper response to answered prayer from God, I'm pretty certain the book of Psalms has something to say about that, and that's Psalm 138, which, by the way, titled in the book of Psalms. Not all of them have titles, some of them do. This one is A Thankful Heart. So I think we're zeroed in on the right spot. It is a specific prayer of thankfulness. And so that's why it's perfect for us. It actually provides a model for prayer. We're going to look at the components that it provides to give us a model for our prayer of thankfulness. And it's fantastic because David doesn't merely just say thank you. No. He moves from a movement of thanksgiving and then he moves to testimony, and then he moves to humility, and then he moves to trust. And we're going to see those movements through these verses, and we're going to use that as a template for how we can respond with a thankful prayer. It's a perfect template. So our big idea today is our correct response to answered prayer is thanksgiving, testimony, humility, trust, and more prayer. So let's get started. When we look at Psalm 38, of course, we've got to start right at the beginning. We're going to start with verses 1 and 2, because what that shows that the first essential, no negotiation whatsoever, first essential step in composing a prayer of thanks is to worship God wholeheartedly. So let's look at those two verses again. I will give you thanks with all my heart. I will sing your praise before the heavenly beings. I will bow down toward your holy temple and give thanks to your name. For your constant love and truth. You have exalted your name and your promise above everything else. This is not polite gratitude. This is passionate worship. David's not being shy about that. We believe that this one is another one of those Davidic psalms, they call them, one of the half that are attributed to King David. And David, you see, he describes his giving thanks with all his heart. And if you've read the Bible for any length of time, you know that David has a little bit of a reputation for worshiping with abandon. Sometimes he did it and got in some trouble for it, got critiqued. Actually, as a matter of fact, let's look at one of those. If you switch, I'll flip on over for you. We'll just do one, okay? 1 Chronicles, this is chapter 15, verse 29. This is as the Ark of the Covenant, the resting place of God, has been exiled and away from the city of Jerusalem for decades, and David is bringing it back. And he is excited, and he wants everybody to know, much to the embarrassment of his wife. As the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord was entering the city of David, Saul's daughter Michal looked down from the window and saw King David leaping and dancing, and she despised him in her heart. Yeah, she wasn't happy about it, but King David didn't care. Okay? He knew that worshiping God wholeheartedly means you use every part of you. Amen. It is physical. It is intentional. It is embodied. It's loud. It's public. Have you ever publicly celebrated that enthusiastically? Or somebody might have to say something to you. You might want to calm that down. No, but nobody. I think the closest that we've gotten is in the first year of our marriage, Karen and I caravanned 6 hours from Corvallis, Oregon to Tacoma, Washington to see a concert. But we had to stand the entire concert because nobody was sitting down for 3.5 hours of Bruce Springsteen. We were exhausted. Everybody was dancing and singing and screaming, Born in the USA, and nobody cared. So I think that might qualify. I don't know that I necessarily have celebrated recklessly that much anywhere else. But David wants us to understand that wholehearted worship takes everything, and it's for God's approval. Man's opinion doesn't mean anything. So we know this is a prayer of thanksgiving. And we know that it's going to be a model for us how to respond to answered prayer. So you would think that all this praise and worship that David starts off with is going to be about this answered prayer, right? And you would be wrong. Because David tells us right there at the end of verse 2 why he's praising and worshiping and making himself a fool about God. It says it right there. I will give thanks to your name for your constant love and truth. Not for the answered prayer that he's going to get to that. But we got something to get out of the way first, most importantly. The word translated here as constant love is the Hebrew word chesed. And it's translated here as constant love. Other parts in the Bible translate it as faithful love. But we need to stop and hover over this word for just a moment, because this may be one of the most important words in the Bible, especially the Old Testament. It is not an exaggeration to say the entire course of human history hangs on the definition of this word. See, we translate it as constant love, but it's way too simple. There isn't one or two English words that can explain this, but I'm going to try. Think of it as a bunch of different parts of it. Right now, it's constant love. But what about part of this is a covenant loyalty? Now, covenant loyalty means a loyalty that never backs down, that never stops. Covenant means forever. So part of it is this covenant loyalty. Then we've got some steadfast love. Now, steadfast love, yeah, that's the love you want, right? Steadfast love doesn't stop. Steadfast love happens whether you deserve it or not. Steadfast love never ends. So you got that part. And then we've got faithful kindness. Another thing about kindness, but faithful never stops. We got kindness, we've got steadfast love, we've got this loyalty and covenant, and then all of this combines into a loving commitment. This isn't out of obligation. This isn't a I have to do this. This is a loving wanting to, I need to, I have to. That's a part of it. And then all of this results in unfailing devotion. Emily and company said it earlier. He is for you. He is for you. He is for you. Amen. You start to see a pattern here? So we put constant love. Okay, well, that's kind of accurate. But it's so much more. So overwhelming. We hear the word love and we think emotionally, and emotions come and go. That is not what we're talking about here. Hesed is it's stronger than any feeling. It's more like covenant and not sentiment. It's a love that stays committed no matter what. A love expressed through commitment and action. And that's why it's not an exaggeration to say that all of human history hinges on the definition of this word. Because if God didn't have this hesed, this steadfast love, this covenantal love, this constant love for us, we wouldn't have Jesus. Right. Because he wanted to go to any lengths to restore this, his relationship with his people. Now we got to go back to verse 2 because we're not done. Remember, it said that that he's specifically thanking God for his constant love and truth. Now, the Hebrew word there for truth is emet. And when we think truth, we think true, false. We think it's just a fact. But the use of the word here isn't in that aspect. It's more in the aspect of permanence. People, despite what our culture tells us today, truth does not change over time. Right. It isn't because it isn't hip now. That's not true anymore. Truth is truth. So truth, when they say and truth, they mean dependability, reliability, over and over, trustworthiness, faithfulness. So if something was emet, if it was truth, it was never going away. It could always be depended upon. And in the context of an eternal God, that means forever. He's not going away, and that's not going away. It's never going away. So you put these two words together that are loaded words, but we just say constant love and truth. But it's so much more. And the interesting thing is that these words appear together throughout the Old Testament in the description of God's character. And probably the most dramatic incident we find, pretty much the first person who referred to God's character with this phrase was God. Let's flip back to Exodus. God and Moses were talking. Exodus chapter 34, verses 6 through 7. The Lord passed in front of them and proclaimed, "The Lord, The Lord is a compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger and abounding in faithful love and truth. Hesed, Emet. Maintaining faithful love, there we got it again, to 1,000 generations. Oh yeah, we heard about those 1,000 generations earlier, didn't we? Did we talk before, Emily? We did not coordinate these songs, right? Okay, just want to be sure. Forgiving iniquity, rebellion, and sin, but he will not leave the guilty unpunished, bringing the consequences of the father's iniquity on the children and grandchildren to the third and fourth generation. So when David uses that phrase, constant love or faithful love, he's not inventing something new. That word had been used for thousands of years in the context of worship and describing God's character. When he said that phrase, everyone of his audience instantly knew what he was referring to. The words that came out of God's own mouth about his character. And apparently we need to be reminded of it over the centuries because it keeps being repeated throughout the Old Testament and including here. He was reminding people what God had told them. He was reminding them again that it was still true. And it's still true today. Amen. Now I'm going to get back to this is what David is praising. Not the prayer, answer to prayer that's coming. This is the reason that David says we should praise him with all our hearts. Before we even get to the answered prayer, we should start with this. And the important thing here is this is a very, very important point. We didn't start with the model that David gave us with the answered prayer, and let's move on. We didn't just start with answered prayer and then thanksgiving. No. We started with thanksgiving because we need to thank God for who he is and what he's done and how much he loves us. That's a given. And then we'll get to the prayer. Amen. Why that is so critical, it's about focus. So I'm a pediatrician, and almost 34 years ago, we got brought here from Oregon to Shepherd Air Force Base. Back then, Shepherd actually delivered babies, about 300 a year. So I came out of fresh training, and I had been at a university hospital with a neonatal intensive care unit. And every delivery I'd gone to, there was about 10 doctors and 50 nurses and 10 respiratory therapists, and I don't know what I'm doing here. And then suddenly I went to Shepherd, and I went to a delivery, and it was me, one nurse, and the OB who had his own nurse, and we didn't talk because we were busy doing our own thing. So to say it was a little scary is a bit of an understatement. But I trusted the training I had. But there were scary times. And I became a Christian soon after arriving, so I spent a lot of time praying on the way to deliveries. I'll never forget one of the scariest deliveries I ever went to. And it's still one of the top 10 and after 34 years. It was a baby who was getting ready to be born, but it was a meconium baby. Some of you ladies know what I'm talking about, even some of the guys. So meconium is that first bowel movement that a baby has. Bowel movement. Everybody know? Poop. Did I say it? Oh, it did it. Okay, I wanted to know if it was going to come up on the screen. Sorry. You know babies are not supposed to do this before being born, right? When they do it before they're born, they're in danger of inhaling it into their lungs, and when that stuff gets in your lungs don't work, and you die. And babies have died for a long, long time because of that. And so we have some very particular things we're supposed to do perfectly during the delivery so that doesn't happen, or we can minimize the amount of damage. And we did that. It was perfect. And by the time we were finishing and beginning to let the baby breathe on its own, and she started crying, and she started pinking up, and we were like, yes, we did it. And then the child vomited up all of that meconium and inhaled it again. And she went into respiratory failure, and I had to intubate her, put her on a helicopter, and send her to Cook's. She ended up on something called ECMO, which was new back then, but it's old school now. Miss Eliana can tell us all about that. And That is basically a heart-lung bypass that allows sick lungs to rest and not do their job and heal, so that then they can start doing their job and the child can live. And this child lived. Now, I don't remember, but I've been told by the mom many, many years afterwards that when they came back for their follow-up visit after being discharged from Cook's, she said, "You would not let me take her out of your hands, and you kept saying, 'This is a miracle baby. This baby is a miracle.'" Now, on a side note, I don't know if it's another miracle or not, 25 years later, that young lady was walked down the aisle by her father, and she married our youngest son, Michael Johnson. And last month, they celebrated 10-year anniversary. So, when I'm really feeling a little annoying for my son and I want to needle him a little bit, I will say to him, "You realize, of course, that you owe your wife's life to me." And without missing a beat, my son says, "Okay, but what have you done for me lately, Dad?" When we put the focus on our thankful prayer and we start with the answered prayer, we are in danger of asking God all the time, "What have you done for me lately?" If we're only praying to God and thanking Him when the prayers are answered, "What have you done for me lately, Dad?" The question is, when God answers prayer, do you celebrate the answer or the one who answered? Let me rephrase that. When God answers prayer, should you celebrate the answer or the one who answered? So step one is worshiping God wholeheartedly, and that has nothing to do with the answered prayer that you're praying about. It's because He deserves it. That's the first step. Second step in composing a proper prayer of thanks is specifically name what God did. So we're getting to that now. We're getting to the answer to prayer. Look at that verse 3. "On the day I called, you answered me, you increased strength within me." So David is getting specific now. Now he's getting down to he's saying when, he remembers when he did it. He remembers what he prayed. He remembers when God answered and what he did. He's sharing all of that. He's saying it out for everybody. So he's specifically naming what God did. Because David knew that gratitude goes deeper when you're specific. I mean, it's okay to say, well, that vague, "Oh, thanks for everything." But he names God's interventions in his life. And you all know that there is nothing more powerful testimony than answered prayer. Nothing. There are very few things in the world that can witness to God's glory than you sharing the story of, "This is what I asked, and this is where God met me." Nothing. Whether that's changed circumstances or increased strength like David asked for here, or whether it's healing, wisdom, or peace, it doesn't matter. All of it is a powerful reminder to us that about His constant love and truth. Hesed emet. So we need to remember gratitude and faith grow when we are specific. So step one, worship God wholeheartedly. Step two, specifically name what God did. Step three, give God public credit. Look, this is demonstrated in the next verses, 4 and 5. "All the kings on earth will give you thanks, Lord, when they hear what you have promised. They will sing of the Lord's ways, for the Lord's glory is great. Though the Lord is exalted, He takes note of the humble, but he knows the haughty from a distance. So last week, Karen and I went to Indiana, and we saw our son Michael graduate from Purdue University with his Bachelor's of Science degree in business school, economics. Anyway, we're very proud of him. But to go there, the plane was really leaving real early on Thursday morning, so we went Wednesday night and spent the night with some longtime friends, Clinton and Shelby Hicks. Clinton used to be on staff here at Colonial. As a matter of fact, Clinton and Shelby have both been on Jacaranda Care trips with us, and Clinton is OG Jacaranda. He was on trip number 1. Anyway, we love them and their kids, and so we got to visit with them, and while we were visiting, the television was on, and, I don't know about you, but I don't really have broadcast TV on anymore. And so something started happening, and it got our attention because suddenly there was an interruption for a news bulletin. Now, those of us who grew up in the days before there was streaming, when that stuff happened, there was somebody dying. So we were like oh my gosh, what's happening? And proceeded to show us footage of President Trump arriving in China and meeting the Chinese Prime Minister. That's it. That's it. When kings speak, the world listens, even when they have nothing important to say. Am I right? Well, let's give them something important to say. See, all the kings of the earth will give you thanks. David is looking forward to that time when all of the earth, when every knee will bow, or every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. That time is coming, and he's looking forward to that. He said all the kings, not just the Jewish kings, all the kings. And then they will sing of the Lord's ways, for the Lord's glory is great. So David's repeating this pattern where God acts, we testify about it, and others glorify God in response to that. That happens over and over, both in the Bible and in our lives. Answered prayer becomes testimony. And nowhere is this more important than church life. Small groups. Karen and I joined this church in October 25th, 1992. I found our membership card. And 99% of the time, we've been in a small group with a few small, brief things. And I'm going to tell you right now, there's no greater blessing than to be able to walk through life with fellow Christians and sharing your stories about how God moves in your life. Heck, we got to see God move in people's lives in front of us for the last 34 years. When believers tell stories of answered prayer, it builds our faith. It strengthens our faith, both ours and those who hear it. So answered prayer should become testimony, because after all, the kings of the world can't testify until they get told. That's what that verse says, when they hear what you promise. So we have to testify. So, worship God wholeheartedly, specifically name what God did, give God public credit, and the fourth component of proper prayer of thanks is be humble. I know that seems kind of weird, but that's what, if you look at this next verse, see what David's telling us. Though the Lord is exalted, he takes note of the humble, but he knows the haughty from a distance. This is a very, very important warning from David, because, let's be honest, we all know prayers don't always get answered in the way we want them to. So when it happens, yeah, we are happy, and we are very susceptible to spiritual pride. My prayer got answered. I must have prayed right. Oh, my faith must be bigger. So David knows this is a danger, and he's a king. He knows what happens if you start getting puffed up. So David knows that gratitude pours out of the fact that God didn't answer. He didn't answer David's prayer because he was famous or impressive. He answered David's prayer because he was gracious. He did it whether he deserved it or not, because he had his constant love and truth. Now, You notice he says, God knows the haughty, and he keeps his distance. Listen, I don't know about you, but I'm not signing up for the t-shirt that says God is distant. Anybody? No. But here's the interesting thing. Haughty can also be translated as arrogant, but my favorite definition is haughty are those who exalt themselves. Oh, wow, now it makes perfect sense. The exalted one is a little ticked at people who exalt themselves, because when we do that, we're lifting ourselves above God. And so David warns us, do not do that. Do not head in that direction. Go towards humility, because God draws close to the humble. That's the t-shirt I want. God draws close. Yes, I'll sign up for that one. But remember, David wants us to never forget that God is the focus here, not us. Notice, even in this one verse, he begins with, the Lord is exalted. He don't want, in case your attention wandered from 2 verses ago, let's get it back. God is exalted. Now we'll deal with us imperfect humans. God is exalted and we are dependent. So answered prayer should deepen our humility, not puff up our self-confidence. So worship God wholeheartedly. Specifically name what God did. Give God public credit. Be humble. And the last rule, or guideline, or component for a proper prayer of thanks is let past answers strengthen future trust. Let's look at these last 2 verses. If I walk into the thick of danger, you will preserve my life from the anger of my enemies. You will extend your hand. Your right hand will save me. The Lord will fulfill his purpose for me. Lord, your faithful love endures forever. Do not abandon the work of your hands. This psalm ends with confidence. Basically, David's saying, hey, you answered before, so I'm trusting you. Right? And notice the progression from the past where he says, you answered me back in verse 3, and then here a few verses later, it's confident projection of prediction, right? Your right hand will save me. And by the way, that's probably a subtle nod to Jesus, although they probably didn't know it at the time, because who is at God's right hand? Anyway, sorry. And then we get to the prediction of these confident predictions about the future. Your right hand will save me, and the Lord will fulfill his purpose in me. So answered prayer strengthens our faith for the future. Because David knows trouble's not over. That's where he says. He says that if I walk into the thick of danger, of course, we know from a previous lesson, grammatically speaking, when he says that, he doesn't mean if, he means when I walk into the thick of danger. So he knows it's coming. It's inevitable. But his gratitude creates confidence. He's saying, God, I know who you are because I've seen what you've done. And when David says, I know you, he means God's true character. His constant love and truth have been made obvious by what God has done. So yesterday's answered prayer becomes tomorrow's confidence. Now I want us to pay close attention to how this psalm ends, because there's a little twist, I think. You see, he uses the phrase, your faithful love endures forever, which is actually a very common phrase in the Old Testament. I mean, very common. Like there's a Psalm 2 verses before that uses it 26 times. That's how common. So, but if you look at all the other instances of where that verse appears, or it ends with a period, and the next verse starts. But that's not what David does here. There's a comma, and then he adds one last comment. Do not abandon the work of your hands. See, David's not getting in, praising God for who he is. Hey, and oh, by the way, thank you for this answer to prayer. Getting out, and we're done. No. David's letting God know just one more request. Let's keep doing this. God, we want to be your hands and your feet. We want to do the work of your hands, so keep asking us to. We want to be obedient. So our big idea is that the correct response to answered prayer is thanksgiving, testimony, humility, trust, and more prayer. I don't ever want to feel like I'm asking God, what have you done for me lately, Dad? So I came up with some action steps that might help us do that. We're going to start with keep a prayer journal. Now, I'm sure we've all heard this before. I don't know how many people keep up with it or do it. And I want to do it for a different reason than you think. See, my frustration with prayers is not praying, because I appreciate and love praying. But most of the time I pray, and okay, thanks, bye. And then I don't even remember following up on that. So a prayer journal keeps track of God's blessings, where God has answered prayer, so that we can continue to be reminded, because once again, we're slow learners and fast forgetters, and so we need to be reminded of God's love regularly. So keep a prayer journal so that you can keep track of seeing God moving around you. And then share with someone how God has moved in your life. It's so simple and it's not that scary. But it is a powerful testimony. And then this is sort of a catch-up homework kind of thing. Because I do believe that, like many, we get in a hurry. And yes, we prayed. We meant it when we did it, but we passed on to the next thing. So spend some time this week thinking about prayers that you've prayed over the last year. And pray for them again. And find out what happened, maybe. Find out if you have more testimony to share about God. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't think God needs to do anything lately, regardless, right? Didn't he do the ultimate act in all of human history? Yes. Didn't he? He came out of heaven to earth as a human, a man, to live a perfect life, to die on a cross, to pay the price for our sin for now and all eternity, to raise up 3 days later and defeat death. I think he's done enough.